Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for this session. It's a pleasure having you all joining us virtually for FAIR's Football People Festival weeks. Throughout the week, 12 sessions, 50 speakers, incredible discussions taking part throughout the week. For you to get involved, get those hashtags going on Twitter, hashtag Football People. Now, the festival is the largest campaign for social change and diversity in global football, with 150 participants taking part throughout the world every year. And it's a pleasure for me to be taking part this year. I'm your host, Mimi Fawaz, for the next hour for this important discussion in football. We do want you all who have taken part to please send in your questions. And in the last 50 minutes, I will try and answer as many questions as possible. Now, it's been such a big year. So much social change has been happening in the world, and football has been right at the front and center of that change. The topic for today is, where are the Black coaches in football? A pertinent question that has been spoken about over the years. And as I said, this year more so, it has shone the light on that. Joining me to discuss that and also break down the core issues and hopefully find some solutions moving forward are key actors in the game. Joining me is England under-21 coach and former Birmingham City defender, Michael Johnson. Hello.
Hello, Mimi. How are you?
Good. It's really good to have you joining us today. Also taking part in the discussions is another former footballer, Mpo Mpensa, who's joining us from Belgium. Ça va? Bonjour, tu vas bien?
Hello everybody. Merci, je vais très très bien. Et comme vous l'avez très bien dit, je suis belge. Donc noir de peau, mais belge.
Merci beaucoup pour ça. Joining us from the Netherlands is somebody who's familiar to the TV screens over there as a TV presenter, but he's also the chairman of the Dutch FA Finals Committee, Humberto Tan. Sorry, I don't know how to say hello in Dutch, so hello in English.
Oh, it's quite the same, actually. You could say hello. That's almost that's in Dutch, and also in Flemish, by the way. But we can understand hello as well. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. And also from the Netherlands is a man who's done a lot of publications on this very topic, Dr. Jacoban Stekkenberg from Erasmus University. Hello.
Yes, hi, everyone. Thanks for inviting me here. I feel a bit humble as a researcher amongst these well-known people from football and media, but I try to bring in my little piece of knowledge as well. Thank you.
No. Lots of knowledge. It's a pleasure having you. All right, so let's get straight to this discussion. Dr. Yako, I'm going to put you on the spot because you've done, as I said, a lot of publication on this topic. Where are the Black coaches in football, not just in Europe, but around the globe? And you've been doing some research for FAIR on that. Can you give an insight into your research?
Yes, of course. So we did some research some years ago. That was 2014 when the report was published with colleagues Steve Bradbury and Patrick Millon. And that was about the representation of minority coaches in many European countries. And what we found then at the time was that even though on the pitch it's diverse in terms of ethnicity, ethnic backgrounds of players, when we move on to the leadership and coaching levels, then Black coaches are severely underrepresented, even though they have the certificates, right, and everything, but it's really quite hard for them to kind of break that glass ceiling. The report was also called the glass ceiling report. So to give some numbers, around 3.5% of the coaches were of a minority ethnic background. And we have repeated that research. Actually, it's still ongoing. This year, we're publishing another research by FAIR. And what we see, and this is quite discouraging, is that these percentages have not really changed. Right? When it was 3.5% back then, it's now, I mean, the report is still ongoing, but we estimate it's around 4% of minority ethnic coaches right now in 14 European countries, professional football leagues, that is, but also national football associations. And those numbers are quite clear, I think. And the minority ethnic coaches that are there, they are men. And when we talk about women, they are nowhere to be found. So it's 0, 0, 0 in all those countries, basically. So that gives kind of an image of how it is and how it changes. Well, it doesn't really seem to change a lot over the years, even though as football associations say they want to change it, but in practice, the figures show it doesn't really seem to happen.
As you said, over the years, it hasn't changed very much. In your research, what have you found to be the core issues why they're not able to break those glass ceilings?
So there are a few issues here. So we've done many interviews to look behind the figures, like you say, right? We want to know also about the mechanisms behind that. And for instance, I've done many interviews with coaches of a minority ethnic background in the Netherlands, and others did it in England and France, etc. So one of the things is stereotyping. Stereotyping is an issue. Still, there is a very persistent stereotype of Black coaches, but I would say in general, Black people as being good athletes, natural athletes almost, but not so fit for leadership. So they're seen as fit for playing, but not for coaching and management. This is a stereotype, it's a prejudice, but it is quite persistent, and it's quite widely circulating within also media and the football industry. Club owners also have these stereotypes, and it's a relatively closed, wide, masculine network. The football leaders, the coaches, it's mainly consisting of white males, and they tend to use these stereotypes and don't tend to reflect on them. So they see themselves as very race neutral. They see themselves as meritocratic, right? That they give everyone a fair chance. However, the stereotypes, we know that they exist. They don't tend to reflect on that. That plays a role, and it also plays a role that, as a result of that, minority ethnic coaches, Black coaches, are often seen by them as a risk. A risk between brackets. They perceive it as such, and then they tend to hire people that look more like themselves, which in this case is very often white men who have more of an association in the general society as being associated with leaders, managers, and they are not seen as a risk so much because they look like themselves. The leaders themselves are white males. So that is a kind of a mechanism that you see, and that's very persistent. And that again results in very few role models that are, of a minority ethnic background. And so young people are not really socialized into the coaching profession. They see on television, for instance, Premier League coaches who are white men, and there are not so many role models. And if they are there, they are in a more vulnerable position, and not being rehired, not as often being rehired after losing their job, etc. So it's a more vulnerable position at the same time.
Michael, I want to come to you because Dr. Jacco there has touched on a lot of issues where he's spoken about the physicality of players. So when you see on the pitch, for example, Raheem Sterling has spoken about how in the Premier League here in the UK, there are about 500 players. Out of that, a third of them are Black. But then you're not seeing that represented across the board. I know I personally recently spoke about how Black players are often spoken about in terms of their physicality. And I had people going at me on social media disagreeing with me. What has been your own experience?
No, Dr. Jacco is 100% right. There is certain perception of Black players. You always hear the terminology, the strong, the powerful, and the athletic. But the media, particularly over here, doesn't talk in terms of the intelligence of Black players, the leadership of Black players. And we've seen so many influential Black players at the top flight of English football and world football who have been intelligent, who have been smart, who have been leaders within their own environment. But yet this doesn't transition into positions in boardrooms, in senior leadership positions. And so even the stats Dr. Jacco is talking about there is very much on the point here. We have 33% of players in the top flight playing from a Black heritage background. Yet we only have 4% transitioning into management roles. And then even when you go into senior leadership positions, by that I mean chief executive, sporting directors, it's less than 2%. And then when you go into boardrooms, it's pretty much zilch. So there's a lot of work to be done, but it's encouraging that we're having these discussions and debates.
What about for you personally? We'll get a bit more to all the areas that you've touched upon, but for you personally, you've spoken about recently about how you had to travel across the world to even be given an opportunity as a manager.
Yeah, and I think it's quite an interesting point because I've been qualified for 10 years. I have my pro license, A license, B license. I have 2 master's degrees. I have diploma in football management, corporate governance. Yeah, I can't get a job over here. I'd sent out over 40 applications for roles, and I got interviewed by 2. And the 2 that I got interviewed was outside of the professional environment. It was the non-league. And the way that I got interviewed for the role at Guyana, where I eventually ended up, was because a friend of ours, I know, Emma would know him as well, Jason Roberts, moved to CONCACAF. And Jason Roberts, because the process was fair, was able to put my CV on the desk of a president of Guyana. So for the first time, I was in a race, and it's even. I wasn't not given this opportunity because any reason. I was given the opportunity to showcase what my talent was. And so the process went from 200 to 10. I entered in at 10, from 10 to the final 3, and then I was given the opportunity. And that's how I got the position at Guyana, because the recruitment process was fair, was transparent, was open. It wasn't an old boys network. And Jason was allowed to put my my CV on the desk of the president and say, this is somebody that may be of interest.
And Bo, have you had sort of similar experiences, in terms of your days of playing football and now as well in your role? What have been some of your experiences?
Yes, I'm going to speak in French. Okay.
Okay.
Oui, en fait, j'ai exactement la même chose que Michael. Si vous voulez, j'ai joué au foot, puis j'ai été à l'école, j'ai passé mes diplômes, Uefa A, j'ai un master en management, et malheureusement, au plus on monte, au moins il y a de personnes de couleur, que ce soit au niveau du management, au niveau des entraîneurs. Et donc, c'est vraiment compliqué parce que on utilise le joueur pour jouer au football, c'est tout à fait normal, mais malheureusement, il y a un manque total de leaders noirs, si je peux dire ça comme ça, pour être entraîneur ou travailler dans le management. Et ça, c'est vraiment, vraiment, vraiment compliqué et c'est difficile parce que je pense que c'est aussi le fait que le football est tellement conservateur que les personnes travaillent toujours entre elles, mais ne s'ouvrent pas. Et ce qui se passe dans le milieu du football, c'est ce qui se passe dans la société. Malheureusement, les gens ont peur du changement. Et c'est pas parce que la couleur de peau vient dire qu'on est entraîneur au niveau de management ou entraîneur au bord d'un terrain qu'il n'y a pas de qualité.
Okay, Humberto, I see you nodding, so I guess you understood everything Umbo spoke about. He said he agreed with Michael Johnson over there in terms of the color of somebody's skin affecting them getting those opportunities, and he had those similar experiences is what he said. And he also spoke about how there was in leadership a lack of Black figures. That's what he's also touched upon. And it's a very conservative, closed shop between, I guess, as Michael touched upon, networks, contacts, which prohibits Black coaches from really penetrating in.
Yeah,
and it starts not only when you want to get job as a coach, but it also starts at a level because these two have their management skills. They did the education to do it. But what we see here as well is to get in the curriculum because the selection starts there already. I once read this book about Ruud Gullit, one of the first Black managers in the Premier League. And in order to be the first Black manager, you have to be World Soccer Player of the Year. But in the British teams, over 60 teams, you could be ex-drunk, teethless player, and you could have a management position, and that's what you talk about. So we know it's not about the quality. That's one. Two, as Jacco Sterkenburg already pointed out, it's not only in England, it's the case in France, it's the case in the Netherlands as well. And the perception of non-existing black leadership in the pitch is something that's really still exists. And you saw the same effect in the NFL in the United States. And you had this phenomenon, what's called stacking. They used to say that a quarterback should always be white. And I mean, they would say it out loud. I'll say it as people would say. Don't be offended, because I'll just repeat what had been said for years. What has been said for years is, if you're black, a nigger can't be a leader. So they would never put him in a quarterback position. Now, in the States, it's starting to change. Look at Lamar Jackson, for instance, one of the black quarterbacks. But that same perception, they don't say it out loud in Europe like that, because that's why I'm saying it so rude, because people weren't afraid of saying it. It was normal. But if you have to grow up in an environment like that, how would you expect people to give you a position which is really a position full of responsibilities? So that's why it's so important that you have people like Michael Johnson, like Mbopo Mpenza, that do have those positions. Because I totally agree with Jacco, not only because of the fact for the people themselves, but also because of the fact you need those role models. And in Netherlands, with the committee Mijnals, we're trying to change that, and not only on the coach position side, but also on committees in the board of supervisory boards, board of directors, key positions in football. Black coaches is one thing, but it's more than that. And I think we should focus not only on the coach, which is really important, but management key positions as well.
So talking about those key positions, and you've touched upon the work that you are doing, which part of it, of course, is tackling racism, I believe, and also for inclusion. Do you feel then that there is a lack of effort across the board to make, active changes in the boardroom, in the technical areas, coaches, managers, etc.?
I'll focus on the KNVB only, on the Dutch league at the moment. I don't think there's a lack of effort. But there is, let's say, politically correct, there's room for improvement. What you see in the Netherlands is, yes, there are lots of plans. Yes, we have a committee. And yes, we want to. But the thing that really lacks, and we're working on that, as a matter of fact, right now, you got to feel the sense of urgency. And the moment you don't feel it, I mean, first you got to see it. Some people don't see it, so we tell it. But then when you see it, that's not enough. You got to feel it, because if you don't feel it, you won't act up on what you see. And that's where the difficulty starts, because I mean, we see and feel it, so we try to make plans about it. We write notation about it. We have all the studies Jacco Sterkenburg had, so it's science-based as well. So it's not from here. No, it's science-based. Look at the figures. Look what's happening. We can do this, and try to look for instruments to improve it. And one of the instruments we try to introduce is the Rooney Rule. And we're having this conversation in 2 weeks with the Dutch League as well, because we wrote about it and we talked about it quite a lot of time. And they're quite open to it, but it has to be officially signed into, okay, we're going to do this. So they like the idea, but it's not official yet.
Not official yet. Okay. Well, we'll keep a close eye to see if in the coming months, or I don't know, over the next year.
I hope weeks, not months.
Weeks. Okay, that's good. We'll be keeping an eye to see if it comes over the coming weeks. Now, Jacco, as I've mentioned in my intro, you've done a lot of publications about this very topic. It's such a broad topic. How do we go about, in your opinion, visibility, increasing diversity?
I think I really want to follow up and agree completely with what Umberto just said. I couldn't, formulate it in a better way, in the sense that we had the problem, and sometimes we still have the problem that people don't see the problem. Then once people see it, acting upon it is a second step. And that also doesn't always happen. So I think in the Netherlands, for instance, people do see the problem, but then acting upon it is a step that's still difficult. And I think it sounds very simple, but one very important thing is listening to coaches, Black coaches, and listen to their experiences, listen to their advice. This also, I think, applies to, for instance, in the Dutch context, which I know best, it also means for the KNVB, the association, to listen, for instance, to the minors committee who bring in advice, but to listen and take it seriously. And I think there is still a lack of that, simply listening and taking it really seriously, because I still feel it doesn't really happen enough. It's not always taken seriously. For instance, when I do interviews with minority ethnic coaches, then sometimes the answer tends to be like, okay, but that is their perspective. It's not objective. It's their experience, right? So maybe it's just their own story, their own narrative, and maybe we should, and we should get rid of that, because that's. And I have the impression that things are changing across Europe, across the world, also in the context of Black Lives Matter. I think these people do listen better. The white club owners do listen better, but not always. And I am afraid that the attention will ebb away when this topic is not really on the agenda anymore. It was on the agenda in the Netherlands because of racism in the football stadium. Worldwide, it was on the agenda because of Black Lives Matter. But of course, there's a different context now, and I'm afraid sometimes that it ebbs away. And then nothing will change, right? So, and that is what 4 years ago when we wrote the report, many associations told us in a meeting organized also by Uefa, they told us we will do something about this. We will increase diversity. 4 or 5 years later, we write the same report. The figures haven't really changed. So that shows a lot. So listen better to the people, basically to the people also in this panel, right? And then act on it. Rooney Rule is important, not only for coaches, but also for assistant coaches, I would say. Maybe not invite one minority coach, right? The Rooney Rule is about inviting a minority ethnic coach in when there's a vacancy. Maybe not inviting one, but two. Make it a bit more radical, make it a bit more, right? And also for assistant coaches. I mean, there's a pipeline, and that should also be important, right? To build that experience for coaches. But it also starts sometimes at the amateur level in clubs when stacking takes place, right? Umberto already referred to this, when Black players are put on the side as wingers because they are seen as fast and quick. The thing is, when you are positioned there, you are not seen as the leader in the field, because the leaders in the field are usually considered the people in the center. And so it already starts there when players are put on positions that are not associated with leadership. And when you want to become a coach, usually we know that it's better to be associated with leadership already on the pitch, rather than when you have been, a winger, right, and being associated with fastness. So it means going to youth academies, discussing with stereotypes, and trying to change them, trying to make people aware of that, trainers, coaches on that level already. So it's very complex, and it's a long-winded process.
And it is complex, if I may fill in, because we're talking, I said something about not only coaches and assistant coaches positions, but also in the boards. At the moment, for instance, the KNVB, the Dutch league, asked us to assist them into looking for lawyers, because we need lawyers at the disciplinary committee, at the license committee, at the regulations committee. So we need a lot of lawyers. So they said, could you help us finding them? And I said two things. Yes, of course we can help you find them, but we're not an employment agency. What you got to do is try to find a process where you can have like a pipeline. That's one. Two, you need a budget. For this moment, of course, I will try to help you, but because it's not my specialty to find lawyers, you got to have a process and a budget to find good lawyers if you want to diversify your employees on that fact. And thirdly, if you have that process in place, it should be in the way that when the Minehouse Committee did not exist, it's in your DNA. It has to be in your DNA. So it's a good start. So they did call us, and they do try to talk to us and help us in that way. But that is really a long way. But before you can find really good people, because you're gonna have good people.
Absolutely.
So yes, I will gladly help you, but it's not enough to fill in the puppets. You need a process.
Michael, what do you feel that process is? Both Humberto and Jaco have touched upon, the Rooney Rule in the NFL, or should there be made active efforts that in each position, there should be someone from a diverse background in those positions? The boardroom, as I said, Raheem Sterling has pointed to that. Carlton Cole, former England player, has spoken about, we need that visibility, he said. We need people in those boardrooms who are making those decisions.
Yeah, I mean, in England, where I currently operate, we're talking less than 2% in boardrooms. And that, for me, is where the structures, the regimes, the legislation is all put in place. And if that is not diverse, then how does a senior leadership team that represents a governing body or a club, how do they cater not only for the needs of players, needs of fans, the needs of the staff, if there's no diversity at the top table? So it's so important here that we look at how administrators have a real part to play. Yes, I think it was Umberto said about the coaches and managers are important. Of course they are. But for me, the long-term stability of football needs to be addressed in those decision-making processes where people who look like me can be able to help steer the organization in terms of diversity and equality. And I think there's a piece that's been missing as well in our discussions here. This isn't just about black players, people of ethnicity saying that we want jobs. Of course we want jobs, but we want opportunity to get the jobs is important. But I think this last piece about the wider community, it's inspirational and motivational for young children to be able to see people that look like them in senior leadership positions. So when we're talking about school, when we're talking about university, it inspires people, young children, to go and get their qualifications, which keeps them out of trouble because they see that there's a potential to achieve what Umberto has achieved or Embo's achieved, or you, Mimi, what you've achieved. It's important that we get people in those positions to make sure that the environment that we live in is inspired and motivated and their dreams are reality because they see people in senior leadership positions. So yes, coaches and managers, yes, for administration, but also let's not forget the role that this plays in terms of young children.
And if I may fill you in, Michael, because I really like what you say. I saw this interview with Denzel Washington, and he was asked, because he was directing this movie with an all-black cast, and the interviewer asked him, "Is this about color?" And he said, "No, it's about culture." And I'll give you a football example, because if you're not diverse enough in your management team, in your coaching team, you got a bigger chance of losing quality. At the same moment, we have this big player in the Netherlands called Ihataren from PSV Eindhoven. Ihataren is an 18-year-old player with a Moroccan background. He's got some difficulties. I spoke to the general manager last week from PSV Eindhoven, and they're really struggling a bit. And he said, the guy who really still has contact with him is Adil Ramsi, also with a Moroccan background. And he's one of the youth coaches at PSV Eindhoven. Ziyech, a national player for Morocco. He was on the brink of choosing between the Dutch national team or the Dutch Moroccan team. They didn't really court him, not really, because they didn't really feel the sense of urgency. He chose Morocco. So the fact that you don't feel things, that can make you lose quality. So it's not only because of we think it's really important because we want to see ourselves, and of course that's important as well, as you say it, and we want a job, but it's if you want to have a bigger chance of having bigger quality, and of course Gullit and Lukaku and or Mampensa, if they're so, they'll come through because they're so good. But there are lots of players that are really on the brink of maybe not, maybe, and they can find confidence into culture as well because you understand better what's going on in the families, in the friends, in your head. Why are you acting this way? It's a sense of culture, a sense of trust, and a sense of equal, the perception that you see me. You see me in a fair way, and you don't see me in a not fairly way. And that's something that happens as well.
And Bo, I'm sure you've been listening to what Humberto has been saying. Do you agree with him in terms of culture, in terms of seeing me, that influence on, the upcoming generation?
Tout à fait. Hein. Moi, je pense que... Mais déjà, moi, je suis contre tout ce qui est quota. Parce que quota veut dire il n'y a plus de naturel. Parce que quand on met le quota, ça veut dire on va prendre 50% d'entraîneurs blancs, 50% d'entraîneurs noirs. Moi, je trouve que ça ne va pas. Le plus important, c'est de l'éducation, c'est d'avoir au niveau de leur culture. C'est pour ça que moi, j'ai créé un projet avec les enfants. Il y a 400 enfants qui jouent ensemble, qui ne se connaissent pas, mais qui doivent pouvoir parler avec chacun pour pouvoir intégrer, pour comprendre la notion de l'intégration grâce au sport. Et quand on parvient vraiment à éduquer les enfants, au plus ils grandissent, au plus ils ont cette culture. Parce que là, à l'heure actuelle, malheureusement, la plupart de managers, la plupart de propriétaires de clubs n'ont pas cette culture de dire « moi, je prends un noir parce qu'il est bon, je prends une telle personne parce qu'il est bon ». Alors, qu'est-ce qu'on fait? On met des règles, on met des quotas, mais quand on met des quotas, alors on prend des personnes qui ne sont pas capables d'entraîner. Et alors là, qu'est-ce qui se passe? C'est qu'on va prendre des quotas, on va prendre, je donne un exemple, hein, on va prendre 10 noirs parce qu'il faut 10 noirs de quotas. Mais s'ils ne sont pas capables de faire les entraînements, ils ne sont pas capables de manager, mais c'est un gros problème. Et c'est pour ça qu'à un certain moment, je pense que les règles, c'est bien les règles. Mais il faut surtout regarder ce qu'on a à l'intérieur et pas regarder ce qu'on a à l'extérieur. Et ça, c'est le plus important pour moi.
So I'm just going to summarize real quick what Mbo said for the viewers. He's talking about how he's not really in favor of quotas because he feels that, for example, if you say you need to have 10 Black players in so-and-so position, it's just about filling in that vacancy and not necessarily about their skills, and you're missing out on maybe others that might have good skills. But Mbo, if I can just ask you, some players argue, yes, absolutely, they want to be given positions, players or former players who are now coaches or want to get into management, and they want to be given an equal playing field. That's what they said. They don't want to be given an opportunity because they're necessarily Black. So my question to you, as some would say, is it's not necessarily they believe that some of them have those equal playing fields. So then do you not need to have those quotas?
Pour moi, non. Pour moi, je pense que mettre ce genre de quotas, c'est vraiment mettre des barrières. C'est vraiment dire qu'on va mettre des quotas, comme ça on va prendre les minorités. Et voilà, moi je pense que quand on est éduqué, qu'on comprend pourquoi on veut être entraîneur, donc on prend un entraîneur qui a les qualités et on prend un manager qui sait manager, et peu importe la couleur de peau. Mais ça s'apprend à l'éducation dès le plus jeune âge. Ici, malheureusement, comme j'ai dit tout à l'heure, c'est compliqué. Les quotas, c'est bien. Mais moi, je trouve sincèrement, je préfère prendre une personne, peu importe la couleur, mais qui a les qualités de ce que moi, je veux mettre en place. Donc, c'est-à-dire, ici, on parle des entraîneurs de couleur. On prend un entraîneur de couleur parce qu'il a les qualités pour. On ne va pas juste prendre l'entraîneur de couleur pour faire le nombre de quotas qu'il faut. Donc, moi, je ne suis pas favorable pour les quotas parce que alors on prend tout et n'importe quoi. Pour moi, le plus important, c'est si on veut arriver au top niveau, il faut prendre les meilleurs et peu importe la couleur.
Okay, so Michael, I saw you nodding a bit. I think you got a bit of what Mbompensah was trying to say. He's nodding just a little bit. He's not in favor of quotas at all. He doesn't feel that somebody should be in a position based on the color of their skin. It should be based on their abilities. So where do you stand on that, Michael? Because it's good and fine to say abilities, but you do have many former players that are not seeing people as they say in their boardrooms or not given opportunities. For example, as I've mentioned, Sol Campbell says that he starts at -10. He doesn't start from a 0, he said. He said he starts from -10 and has to prove himself to get to that 0. And he's not often necessarily given good opportunities like some others. So where do you stand on all of that?
I think it's an interesting point because in an ideal world, I think Mbo's right. He's right. He's to say that we shouldn't be have to deal with quotas. We should all be seen and be able to start the same starting line as everyone else. The sad fact is that we are, as Sol Campbell says, behind the line. We're expected to catch everybody else without it being a fair race, which makes it difficult. I'm not a big fan of quotas at all. I want to be given a role. I want to be given a job just based on the fact that I interviewed for a position. And I think that's so important to say that, because I think a lot of people who don't quite understand are saying, well, you shouldn't give a black person a role just because they're black. What we're saying is the opportunity to acquire a job should be there. It's the opportunity which is really missing, which is key here. Whether we're not getting to those opportunities because of closed networks, or whether the board itself is not addressing the fact that black coaches and managers can actually show leadership skills. So it's an interesting point that Mbo arrives at. I'm not a fan of quotas, but I don't see any way than actually you have to try and stem the negative by saying, look, this position, we want to encourage black candidates to apply for it because we know that our organization has no black coaches or no black people in sports science or the boardrooms, whatever it may be.
Absolutely. Humberto, I saw you nodding away there as well. Where did you stand on that?
I am nuanced about it. I think in general, in coaching positions in the Premier League or in the Eredivisie, I don't believe in quota either. So that's why we, with the Mijnals committee, were focusing on the league itself, because we have 16 teams in the league itself, the under 19, under 14, etc. So there I'm in for the Rooney Rule. The quota, in general, I agree with Mbompensah, but I'm in favor of quota in education of coaches at the moment, because the pipeline is empty. And I think when you educate coaches, you 15 to 20% of the positions of people getting trained to be a coach should go to black coaches, female, women as well. And then after that, when you let them loose, their strength has to save them, and the Rooney Rule. As long as there's no balance in what's happening. So yes, I agree with Mbompensah, but it's not absolute in my opinion. I think you should diverse in where you have quota and where not. So for me, not in the coaching positions. No, I agree totally. But in, as we call it, coach betaald football, the place where the coaches for professional football are being educated, yes, I think you should, because it's really intransparent what's happening there. Why are some players not getting in and some are? And if you don't break up that system, it stays the same and you will never fill up the pipeline. And that has nothing to do with quality. That has something to do with let people in, because I can show people who have quality, but they don't get to do the education. So you have a status quo. So you got to break that status quo, and it starts with schooling. And in the schooling part, yes, I would say quota is not a bad idea. In the professional part, no quota.
Okay. Well, I've been getting a lot of questions coming in, so I think I probably should start asking a few of you those questions because they're coming in and I've been ignoring them. I'm going to ask this question. Black runners are often seen as faster and Black strikers as more explosive. Which neo-colonial patterns have survived in sport, and how should football look to tackle these prejudices? I think, Dr. Yako, you sort of touched on that, how you said Black players on the field or on the wings. I'm going to come to Michael first to answer. Michael, can you answer that question? Black runners are often seen as faster and Black strikers as more explosive. How should football tackle those prejudices, which Dr. Yako mentioned earlier?
I think Dr. Yako is probably more qualified to answer that than me with the research on it. But I don't see any terminologies around intelligence or creativity or expertise. I don't see nothing around leadership skills. I don't see nothing around the tactics that is needed to run a race. It's not just about the dash. There's tactics which the runners themselves have to apply to it. And these are the kind of things that you don't really hear about when you talk about Black athletes. Serena Williams is prime case of that. You know, where is the tactics? Where's the intelligence? Where's the experiences that she's learned from a leadership angle that makes her the leader that she is in her field, which has been for the last how many years? So for me, it's that connotation that is always thrown at Black athletes, which is just around power and speed. Then that leads itself to media. And then when you go into leadership positions, that's why I believe many persons who are white don't look at a Black man or woman like me and say, well, they've got the abilities to lead.
Okay, Humberto, I've got a question for you here. Somebody from Italy, they say they agree with you. In Italy, the problem is not even seen. And when we try to show, boards definitely do not consider it urgent or relevant either, he says. How do we transmit the sense of urgency? Actually, it's Alice Bruni who's asking this question from Italy.
You need a figurehead. And I can, if he wants to, I can call Ruud Gullit for him. Ruud Gullit is somebody in Italy with presence, and he can tell them in their own language why it's important. And I think you need people like him to talk about it. I have to say, Milan gave, for instance, Clarence Seedorf a chance of coaching. And there you see what's happening. He gets a chance. He didn't do very well, but he didn't do that bad either. But after that, the chances diminishes. It's one chance, and you got to be the best. You got to be Mourinho, you got to be Van Gaal, you got to be the best immediately, otherwise no chances at all. And that's ridiculous, of course. That's ridiculous. So it's good that people get a chance, but coaching is an experience you need in order to get good. So yes, I would love to ask Ruud Gullit if he would like to talk to managers in Italy, and after COVID, happily to come over there and talk about it.
Well, let's have him on the next panel and let's discuss with him next time around. Should we do that?
Parliamo in italiano.
No habla italiano on this side. But Dr. Yako, I'm going to go to you for this question from Evan Whitfield. There is a lot of focus, a lot of focus on coaches and such, being that sport is a creation of legal agreements between private owners. Isn't the reason that there is no change is because owners are blocking it, as this person is saying? What are ways to force the change from ownership?
Yeah, sometimes I think it's true that owners block it. I know from the interviews that I did that sometimes club owners, for instance, they don't want to hire a Black coach because they think the sponsors or the fans will not like it. So they owners block that, and they use as a justification for that the fans and the sponsors. Yeah, I still think that, and that refers back to the earlier conversation. What can be done about it? I think maybe not quota, but the Rooney Rule is not a quota, of course. I think it's an interesting thing about the Rooney Rule is that it creates a more equal playing field in terms of opportunities, right? So ambitious coaches, they have the chance at least to get invited for an interview. And we know from research, for instance, that once that happens, that club owners really get to know the other person at the other end of the table and know qualities, and then the stereotypes decrease. So I think the Rooney Rule is a good measure also here to kind of challenge this blocking that club owners sometimes do. With the Rooney Rule, the important thing there is also that that you should keep that you should monitor how clubs deal with it. What we know from the US is that it can work as long as the Football Association, for instance, takes measures and punishes clubs who do not use the Rooney Rule or only use it in a very superficial way. Then it works. Once, in the US at least, once clubs can get away with it, only pretending to invite a coach but not really doing it. If that's the case, like in the Netherlands kind of happened perhaps, and Humberto knows that this was recent with the appointment of the national, our coach. If it in a way for the form, then it's not really the Rooney Rule, and a measure should be taken. And we know from the US that if the measures are not really followed up on by the association, then it doesn't work. So that's something that I think it could work, but only in when it's used properly.
Yeah. Humberto, is that something you want to touch about the appointment of your recent national team coach that Dr. Yakos touched upon there? Because I know you came out heavily to criticize that there was no proof that anybody from a diverse background had been interviewed for that role.
We had a big clash for everybody in Europe who's listening. We had a big clash with the KNVB. We already spoke about it. We said to each other, okay, we both showed our muscles. You have muscles, we too. So let's get on with it now. But our main point was that's important maybe from Mbo as well, Mbo and Pensa. So the Rooney Rule is not that you are obliged to hire a coach. The Rooney Rule is that you're obliged to invite a coach to talk to him. And at least one coach with, in our case, a black coach, for instance. But you, as league, you decide who you take on basis of quality. So it's not our decision, it's your decision. And that was in place as well with, of course, the head coach. We did not say you need a coach of color, but we did say talk to one. And it's you to decide who you take, because it's your prerogative. It's not ours. We will not fill in names. We will not fill in who you got to take. You got to take. But what we've seen in the NFL is that it rose, the percentage of black coaches when they introduced the Rooney Rule, it went from 6% to 22%. And Jacco is right. You got to do it in a proper way. So when you don't take a black coach, and I think it's not only with black coach, but with coach in general, if you invite a coach and you don't hire him, tell me why in a proper way. So don't make it a cosmetic thing, make it something with substance and show me the substance, because only then you're serious about it. And only then you show that you feel that sense of urgency and you want to build quality. Why wouldn't you want to take Michael Johnson? Why does he have to compete with 200 coaches? And okay, he went to Guyana, now he's in England. That's a good case. But I mean, he went a long way. And we have one black coach here in the Netherlands in the Eredivisie. And I spoke to him and he said, you can't prove if I had to work harder or not. But my perception, if you ask me, yes, I did have to work harder. So it's really hard to prove, but your feeling is not mistaken.
That's like what you've just said. Perception actually is leading nicely into the next question that I actually wanted to ask. Well, I'm going to ask you this question from a viewer, Jermaine Scott. Do you think there is a relation between how the media talks about Black footballers and their post-careers as coaches? I feel like I'm in the hot spot in the hot seat for this one, but I'll put my hand up to say I've been trying to change perspective about African players when they're often described in terms of their physicality. But vas-y, I'll let you answer that question.
Oui, il y a quand même un lien entre, et c'est même, je trouve personnellement, dommage que la presse, les médias doivent parler énormément de ce problème. Parce que quand on parle d'un problème, c'est qu'il y a soit un manque d'information ou soit un manque d'éducation. Et quand on dit qu'il n'y a pas assez d'entraîneurs de couleur, ça veut tout simplement dire qu'il n'y a pas assez de personnes qui veulent engager ces entraîneurs-là, qui sont capables de comprendre que on prend les gens pour leurs compétences et pas pour leur couleur. Et oui, en effet, les médias jouent un rôle très important parce que les médias doivent pouvoir relayer tout ça. Même si maintenant, il y a tout ce qui est les Facebook, etc. Donc, pour relayer tout ce genre d'informations, mais les médias sont très importants. Et quand moi je dis que les médias parviennent à aider à faire que on ne parle plus spécialement de ce problème, ça veut dire qu'on aura gagné, mais le travail est encore très très long. Et les médias doivent vraiment jouer ce rôle afin de faire comprendre que oui, il n'y a pas assez d'entraîneurs de couleur dans les clubs de football.
Yeah, so Bo and Penza talking about the role that the media play in terms of the language around Black coaches and the fact that they should be speaking up more, that there are not enough Black coaches in media. Michael, in Black coaches in the industry. Michael, I'm going to come to you next with this question because it's directed to you specifically. We see Black player groups being established in the US. What role do these player groups have in creating change? Do you think Black players in Europe will create similar groups?
Yeah, I think it's very important. One thing that I know from my time as a player and also current players is that they don't have a collective voice to respond to the game. What we find is a lot of individuals with their perception, but they're not speaking as a collective. And so I think it's so important for Black players to really have their collective voice heard, because we've been so long, we've waited so many decades, and it's not happened. So we now need to make more noise. And the only way that we can make more noise is as a collective. And that voice will need to be heard. So I think that's the most important aspect of that question, is about players now having their voice heard.
Do you think, and this is just my question to you, do you think that as we've seen this year with the whole Black Lives Matter, are you seeing now more and more speaking up and maybe coming more towards that Black collective voice that you're talking about?
Yeah, I think so. I think the game now is with that collective, with that strength, and we all know that unity is strength. I think there's been more opportunities to lobby because now there's more of a structure, there's more of a group behind as opposed to one person standing there. And I think that what's happened, unfortunately, with the incident in America is forced many institutions, football clubs to have a look at their inner workings. Now, some of that may be just because of the pressure. Some of that actually might be, we want to do the right thing here. But I think the more that the Black players and coaches and managers can actually start to create that kind of voice, then it's the more that the institutions will have to listen, because we've waited far too long now. We're finished now with commissions, we're finished with reports, we've finished with placement schemes. It's not the time for that anymore. We can't wait. We can't lose any more generations of administrators, coaches, managers to agencies or to the media. And I have no problem with agencies or none at all, but we're losing generation of talented coaches, managers, because of the lack of willingness to listen and to move upon what you hear.
Boy, if this touches upon a bit about the answer that Michael's just given us, this next question is from Lewis Walker. Would you consider there to be barriers in place for Black coaches that want to achieve their UEFA licenses as well as get managerial jobs?
Yes.
Humberto's
going to answer, then okay, you.
Non, il a raison, oui. Oui, parce que tout simplement, ces diplômes-là vont nous permettre justement à essayer de casser ces barrières qui font que on est toujours je dis on parce que je suis noir, on est toujours bloqué parce que on est jugé que par la couleur et malheureusement pas par le fait qu'on a des diplômes. Et ça, c'est vraiment triste. Comme Michael, on a passé le master management pour essayer justement de travailler dans des institutions, dans des clubs. Moi, je veux commencer en Belgique, mais c'est compliqué, c'est pas simple. Et donc, oui, mais grâce à ces diplômes-là, ça nous donne une crédibilité qu'il faut qu'on cache justement ces barrières grâce à ces diplômes.
So I'm just going to quickly summarize, and Bo says he agrees that the color of your skin is a barrier in terms of getting these qualifications, Uefa licenses, as well as managerial jobs. Humberto, you agreed, you said yes. Let me get you to elaborate a bit on your quick yes.
Bo Pensa said it really well. I totally agree with him. I have to say, in the Netherlands at the KNVB, we have a dot on the horizon, as we call it. And because I understand what Michael Johnson says, get rid of all the commissions and committees and things and that, you need action. And I think you are right. You do need actions. But I'm really confident that the way we started here in the Netherlands, we started really rocky and we started really headstrong towards each other. But that dot on the horizon, within 5 years, what we want is that the KNVB in the Netherlands has to be the benchmark for Europe. The benchmark on inclusion, the benchmark on battling racism and discrimination. It has to be in the DNA of the organization. When we look back in 5 years on an organization, you got to see a total different organization. And we said, if you want to go forward, you better go forward seriously and not only be a benchmark for all football clubs in Europe. And that's not really hard, as we know from the study from Jacco, but also for all the sports organizations in the Netherlands. They got to look to you and say, that's the way you'd go. The question from Italy, that the Italian clubs, the well-willing Italian clubs should look to the KNVB and say, that's the way we want to go. In England, they should say, that's the way we want to go. And I'm really hopeful that not only with words, but also in actions, we actually will do it. So if we talk to each other every year and in 5 years, nothing has changed, I and my committee did really a shitty job.
Wow, that hits the nail on the head, I guess, to sum it up very well. Dr. Jacco, we're hearing what Humberto has been saying there. For you, do you think that where should the priorities be, and should the change come at the national or international level?
Well, both. I think it should be implemented from international, national level. I'm doing this kind of research now for 20 years. I know it's really hard to change things because I think in general, whiteness as a concept, as a scientific concept, means that generally speaking, white people don't usually see their own stereotypes. It's hard. They don't feel the discrimination themselves. So they don't also see the stereotypes, and it's quite hard therefore also to make a change in their minds, right? So I'm a white man myself, so I'm also a part of that group, obviously, and I realize that. So I think the really good thing about the Netherlands now is that they invested money in this, that the committee Minos has been established. However, I'm more skeptical, perhaps, although I do realize that Humberto also probably says it because he hopes this will change in 5 years. I'm more skeptical in the sense that I have seen also the Dutch Football Association making promises in the past, which didn't happen. Within Europe, at this point, and I know that England has many disadvantages, but at this moment, England is ahead of most other countries. Also in implementation of the Rooney Rule, although it doesn't work really that well yet. But so I think, I think the Netherlands has a long way to go, but and other countries as well in Europe. This also includes England, but I'm a bit more skeptical probably. But of course, I do hope, and I think the committee Minos is an important, really important committee in that regard. So I hope that it will make a difference. But I'm after 20 years, I'm also it's hard work.
And please stay skeptical, because we need people like you, because it's not enough. Goodwill, just to be of goodwill is not enough anymore. you got to show what you talk about. And that's for Mo Mpenza, that's for Michael Johnson, that's for Jacco van Sterkenburg, that's for everybody, because we can talk like for hours and nothing changes. And you gotta, I mean, even if low-hanging fruit is difficult to take. I mean, a thing like the small, they don't do it anymore because of COVID, but things like with the national teams, the boys coming on the ground, it's all white. Why? And that's really not difficult. And still, and that's maybe a commercial thing, but it's all what we see. Why, if a boy is like 6, 7 years old and he looks like me, you hardly see one with his hero Virgil van Dijk on the pitch. Why? Why is that? And it starts with such small things like that. And if we're not willing and able to change those kind of simple things, the hard things are really more hard. So I agree with Jacco van Sterkenburg. Please stay skeptical, Jacco, because we really need that. But I have to say, I've seen we're headstrong in this. We're not. Otherwise, we would have said to the KNVB already, okay, we're going to drop out because you don't willing to listen. But they are willing to listen, and but they got the eating of the pudding is in the. How do you see it? The eating of the pudding is in the proof.
Yeah, yes. The proof is in the pudding. Yes. The proof in it,
well, that thing. They don't like the pudding yet, but they will.
All right, well, we'll wait to see if it's a pudding that they're going to like very soon and that we're going to like. We're running out of time, so can I just quickly get all of you to summarize everything? Humberto is saying, stay skeptical. Dr. Jacco has a bit of the words hope in it. Michael, I'm going to start with you if we can just quickly summarize everything and the way moving forward, if you see, any steps being made and if you're hopeful.
I'm a bit skeptical. Like Jacco, I've seen, the last 20 years, the numbers have not really changed, but I'm hoping that with these kind of collaborations, these kind of discussions, that this is a real pivotal moment where we actually do see action. I totally agree with Humberto. The time is now. We want to see stuff. We want to see things not just being spoken about. Where is you doing? But I'm encouraged that, these kind of discussions are, a long way towards making things happen and move a lot more quicker.
All right, quickly, Mbo, if you can summarize what you hope to see in the future.
Alors moi, ce qui est pour moi le plus important, c'est que j'ai discuté avec Elena Dahali, qui est la commissaire à l'Union européenne, la commissaire de l'égalité des chances. Parce qu'ils ont créé un plan contre le racisme pour toute l'Union européenne et ils m'ont demandé de les aider. Ils m'ont demandé d'essayer de trouver des choses à faire pour lutter contre le racisme. Et moi, je leur ai dit juste une chose. J'ai dit, la publicité ne sert à rien, mais il faut faire des choses sur le terrain. Parce que la pub, c'est une bonne chose, mais quand on est sur le terrain et qu'on éduque les gens à comprendre que la peau ou toute forme de discrimination n'a rien à faire sur cette terre. Et c'est pour ça que j'encourage vraiment la Commission européenne de faire des choses qui vont être très, très importantes pour le domaine du sport aussi.
Okay, so just quickly summarizing, Mbo saying he's been speaking to the European Commission and efforts to make changes on the ground. And he's hoping, I guess, that structures will be put in place, policies will be put in place to change these perceptions around Black, I guess, players, Black coaches moving forward. Humberto, quickly, your finishing thoughts, please.
The fact that we're talking about this with such a great panel, Mo Mpenza, thank you to meet you like this, because I've met you on the pitch watching you and really enjoyed it. And I'm really happy to see you the way you speak out about this subject. Michael Johnson, thank you for leading all those youth players, and they're looking up to you now. And you are an inspiration to them, because you probably, because they see you can do this, one or two from your team is about to do it as well, because he saw he can do it. And I know, Jacco, that the way you have been doing all the research all those years, and you're trying to have this faculty about football and racism in the Netherlands, I'm an advocate for that. I really think it's important that you should do that, and I hope the KNVB will support you in that, and we will advocate for it as well. And Mimi, thank you for translating WoW like that really well. And I think, yes, I understand all the skepticism. I mean, Mike, what you say, and Jacco as well. But I once met this mayor in Israel, in Eilat, and he was running for office. And I said, how do you do that? Because it's really an difficult place, the country's in really big difficulties. And he said, the only thing I have is optimism. If we don't have optimism, you can't move forward. I'm doing this project with people of 100 years and older. I interview them and I take pictures of them. And then I ask them, the last question I ask them is, can you give me something? How can I be so healthy and old like you? And I've interviewed 61 of them now, another 39 to go. But what I already see is what they say is, be an optimist. Because being not optimistic is not going to help you. And if you want to move forward, we as a people, as we talk to each other and everybody who's listening, you got to put in an effort. How small the effort is, just put in that effort. And then we see if we can grow. And it's not easy. It's not easy at all.
Okay.
The option of being optimistic. We got to go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Staying optimistic. Very good way to summarize it. Dr. Jacco, very quickly, because we're running out of time. I know you've spoken a bit about, you've done research for 20 years and a bit of skepticism, a bit of hope, a mixture of both.
Mixture of both. In combination, I think, in a combination between, on the one hand, let's say education, prevention is important, combined with also with sanctions where relevant. And I think also combining that with listening to experiences of Black coaches, take them seriously and keep also monitoring progress, whether there's progress or not over time. So that would be my final thought on this. Thank you
very much. Monitoring progress is definitely a good way to end. I thank you so much, all our panelists, for taking part in this really insightful, very interesting discussions. I hope these solutions will be put into place in the future. We'll wait and we watch. Thank you to everybody who registered and who's been watching, and as well sending in your questions. We're very much appreciated. Lots of interesting conversations going out throughout the week for FAIR Football People Week. So go to the FAIRNet website to get a lot more information. Thank you so much, everyone.